Welcome to the scorching arena of valor and the crucible of courage. This is the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Here, in the inferno of life's greatest challenges, heroes are shaped and legends are born. Every episode is a torchlight of wisdom, casting a glow on the paths walked by those who've braved the flames and emerged stronger. In this furnace of fortitude, we'll explore tales of resilience, bravery, and the unyielding human spirit. Each guest brings their own spark of insight, lighting up the darkness and guiding us through the smoke of adversity. With Fireman Rob at the helm, prepared to delve into conversations that smolder with significance and stories that kindle the soul. It's not just a podcast, it's a beacon for all who seek to rise from the ashes and glow with purpose. So stoke the fires of your curiosity and ready your heart for tales of triumph and transformation. The flames are roaring. The stage is ablaze. Welcome to the Forged in the Fires podcast. Let the journey begin.
All right, welcome back to Forged in the Fires podcast. I'm your host, Fireman Rob. Today's guest, unbelievable individual who is making amazing changes in this world, who is successful business owner, an investor, a philanthropist. And then we're going to get into something that he founded that he also was the executive producer of. The power and the impact and the passion in this individual will be felt on this podcast. Paul Hutchinson, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Rob. Super excited to spend time with you and your audience today.
I love your story. I mean, it's you're very successful in a lot of different ways. You know, I want to start with the success that you had in the business realm, because that really led to you being able to really go into other realms and make that huge impact. You know, your business side of you, where did that drive come from? Because you've been a founding partner in investment groups. The last company that you had that you hired out of in 2017, the company had over 10 billion in assets under management. Tell me how that business mindset and that success mindset started with you.
I think it started when I was a little kid. My dad was in business, and I remember at 8 years old, I wanted to have a store in our front yard. And my dad's like, well, what are you going to sell? I don't know. I'll find stuff in the house to sell. I was kind of mad about that. And so I've always had a little entrepreneurial mindset. I had a little worm selling business, selling worms to fishermen that were going up fishing in the mountains and whatnot when I was a little kid, et cetera. But then I moved, my parents convinced me that I should spend my time in school and be a doctor. And I was going to be a pediatric cardiologist, so not a regular doctor, a surgeon, but not a regular surgeon, a heart surgeon, and not one that just a regular one. I wanted to focus on children, and I was 2 months away from taking the MCAT and done all my pre-med work, and I got in a major car accident. I severed the tendons in my hand, and they didn't know if I'd have the dexterity to be a surgeon. I was putting myself through school, teaching and playing the piano. I had played for 15 years, so that one accident kind of made a dramatic change. And I changed my major to business and finance, and started my first company. Sold that when I was 29 years old for $20 million. It was a company that helped people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addictions. I had the marketing company for the Midwest Center for Stress and Anxiety. And we had over 50,000 people a month calling in off of our infomercial to help them get help with these serious issues. So that's my 0 through 29 path. And then after that, I started investing, and I started investing in real estate. I realized if I didn't hire guys smarter than me, I was going to lose all my money in real estate. I was at a big real estate conference. You know, the fund that I started is now, it got taken over and built bigger. It's now over $50 billion in assets under management. But I tell people, guess how much money I earned on my first real estate deal? I lost $500,000, right? My second deal, I lost another $120,000. I'm like, crap, this isn't a very good track.
This isn't going well.
So I hired some good guys and build a fantastic team. And that's what I'm good at. is building teams, building the vision, and bringing together what's necessary to make that happen. So, a lot of times I speak now on creating a global impact, not just earning money for multiple generations, but literally taking that and creating a global impact. And doing all of those requires knowing how to build a team.
You talk about building the team and all these aspects, and one of the biggest challenges that you were saying to me was overcoming your ego. And I think probably a lot of people can understand that and relate to that. Talk to me more about that, learning to overcome your ego to make that difference in your life, not only in your life, but in your team.
Absolutely. Well, I realized when I was 21 years old that, there was a lot of pieces of the puzzle that I didn't have. And too many times people think that they've got the whole story and they don't. I realized, okay, I'm just a kid and I don't have any credibility. So I better hire guys that are older than me and have more gray hair than me if I'm going to have the credibility to do anything, right? So that's what I did. I always would recognize where I was weak. In fact, it was funny. Right before I retired from my investment company, at this time we had 4,000 employees, and we had 70 employees that were just working in accounting alone. And we had a young kid that was brand new to the company, didn't know the history of the company, and he was working in accounting. And his job that day was to have the different partners and the big wigs, so to speak, of the
Yeah.
company sign off on our expense reports. And he comes into my office and has my expense report, and he's having me sign off on it. Now, my expense report at the time, I was I was head of capital markets. I was raising money from ultra high net worth people. So my expense reports had dinners at the nicest restaurants, front row seats at the NBA games, all this stuff. So he asked me, he said, Mr. Hutchinson, do you mind me asking, how did you get your job? And I realized he had no idea the history of the company. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you have the best job in the whole company. You literally fly around the world on private jets. You go to lunch with the coolest people on the planet, and you do all these cool activities. How did you get your job? So I decided to mess with him a little bit. I said, well, Andrew, I used to do what you do. He goes, really? You were in accounting? I said, yeah, I had a spreadsheet and that kept track of the asset valuations of every one of our investments. And I said, and we hired a group to audit us, and Adam worked for that group. Now, Adam was now his boss at our company, right?
Okay.
I said, Adam worked for the auditing company, and he said, Paul, he said, all of the numbers are correct, but there's a hell of a lot easier ways of doing it than what you're doing. I said, so I got replaced by Adam. He goes, oh, you did? I said, yeah. And then I did what Jonathan does. He goes, really? You were underwriting assets? And I said, yeah, I had these huge stacks of paper on my desk every day. And every day I went home with a headache. I said, the only thing I was any good at was going to lunch with rich people. So that's where they put me. And he said, well, how many people were here when you started? I said, just me and John, right? And so it was now 4,000 employees.
Priceless.
But it was the principle of understanding that, yeah, I needed to be the head cook and the bottle washer when I started, but I needed to replace myself with people better than me, or we would never grow. In fact, when John and I were first building the fund, it was so small that, I mean, literally, it was just him and I. We were in an office so small that when we turned around, we would bump elbows. And I remember I was on the call, I was making calls, and we had a project, we needed like $25,000 by Friday. And I hung up the phone and I turned around and I put my pinky by the side of my mouth, kind of like the Austin Powers thing. I said, John, we're going to be $1 billion fund someday. And John's like, Paul, we need $25,000 by Friday. That's a pretty big vision. Exactly. So at the end of the day, John said, Paul, you realize that neither of us have the credibility, the pedigree, anything to run a multi-billion-dollar investment fund.
Yeah.
And we talked about it and we said, yeah, but if we build it right with integrity from the beginning, we will attract the right people. And so that's indeed what we did. We built an empire. Now, that's examples of keeping my ego in check when we were building in small and finding better people. Unfortunately, when you get to a point where, like I did, where you have eventually I had a house with I had 10 bathrooms in my house, 8 private suites, 7.
You need one for each day.
Exactly. I had 7 fireplaces. I had 3 kitchens. I had a basketball court in my basement. I had 2 helicopters. I'm like, I had this crazy lifestyle, and I was the shit. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, when you allow that to get into your life, that mindset of look at me, then indeed things do start falling apart. The
right.
things that were really important in life, like relationship with your kids and your family, and your relationship with God, those things go out the door when you allow your ego to get in the way.
Yeah, I mean, and it changes over time and you change as a person. How did you write that ship? Like, how did you write that ship? Because a lot of people take success and make it their identity instead of a component in their life. How did you write that ship to make
Absolutely.
that powerful impact?
Well, back in my early 20s, I had a mentor that said, Paul, if you want to be really successful, decide today that you're not just going to donate a few dollars here and there to charity. He said the average person donates 2% to charity.
Okay.
He said, make a decision that that number is at least 10% for the rest of your life. For the Christians that are listening, in the end of the Old Testament in Malachi, it says, prove me now herewith, if I will not open you the windows of heaven, that
Yeah.
there will not be room enough to receive it. And it talks about tithe, and talks about donating 10% of what comes in to making a positive impact in the world.
Huh.
And so he encouraged me to make that decision. He said, and for you, he said, I think it ought to be upwards of 15 or 20%. And that was hard. I was
Yeah.
earning $2,000 a month, and at 20% of that's a lot. And I told him this. I said, Matt, I want to be. Wouldn't it be better if I just put my extra money back into my company so I could grow it faster? I want to be successful so that I can be charitable. I didn't realize that I should
Interesting.
be charitable so that I could be successful, right? He said, you can call it karma, you can call it the universe. He said, I call it God. You can call it whatever you want to. There's a higher power very interested in us doing good. And the return on that quote unquote investment will be much higher than anything else you ever do. And so, I was very involved in charity throughout the years. In fact, I tell people I believe that's the number one reason for my financial success. I mean, how
Yeah.
does somebody become a partner, let alone a founder of a 10, $20 billion investment fund? Well, you're not a
Right.
University of Utah dropout like I am, right? The statistical
Hey, you've
probability of
got
me
12 different honorary
honorary
doctorate
doctorate
degrees. So
degrees.
come
Yeah,
on
I've
now.
got I've got honorary ones, but I was literally a University of Utah dropout. And the only way that I can understand the success in all those areas is the fact that I made that decision in my early 20s that I would be very, very charitable and donate until it hurts, so to speak. Well, so fast forward, the thing that kept some things in check was the fact that I was involved in a lot of child-related charities. I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors for 7 years. I was the incoming chairman for Make-A-Wish when I got a call that would change my life. And at this point, I'm living this massive lifestyle, and I got a
Right.
call from our attorney general. And he said, Paul, he said, I know you donate a lot to charity. He said, I have something I need to share with you. It's pretty dark. It's the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and good people don't even know that it's happening. He started talking about human trafficking,
Yeah.
and in particular, child trafficking.
Mm.
And he said there's a Homeland Security agent who's down in Cartagena, Colombia. He's found about 20 children. He wants to rescue them, and he needs about $50,000 to make that mission happen. And at the time, $10,000 could. I was in Make-A-Wish, I could send a little girl to Disneyland for a week with her family, which was important.
Right.
She's struggling with cancer, right? So, but 50,000 here, we could pull 20
20.
children out of hell, get them back to their families. There just wasn't a comparison. So I helped make that happen. And a few weeks later, that agent called me and he said, Paul, he said, I'm in Cartagena, Colombia. There's not just 20 children here. We've identified well over 50. He
Jeez.
said, and there's over 100 children that are tied to other rings in other cities that we need to take all of them down at the same time, because if we just take down one, the others will go into hiding. He
Right.
said, we have a plan that we could rescue all those children on the same day, but I need your help. And I said, well, how much do you need? He said, I need you. Could you be in Colombia in 2 days? He said,
Jeez.
I'm like me, I'm a real estate dude, right? He
Yeah.
said, we have to have somebody who can negotiate a multi-million-dollar real estate transaction with the traffickers, with the cartel. He said that the head trafficker has a piece of property that he wants to develop into a child brothel sex resort, like the Jeffrey
Jeez.
Epstein Island type thing.
Right.
He needs a few $1 million to make it happen. He believes he can make tens of millions of dollars a year selling children to
Hmm.
wealthy Americans. He said, this is our plan. He said, you fly down here, you pretend like you're interested in funding his project under one condition. He has to throw a party in the next couple of weeks. You're going to bring down your rich friends who are interested in this kind of thing, and he has to show up with all of his existing inventory and all the inventory of other traffickers that he's working with in the area, just to prove to you that he has access to the children that would make this project successful. He said, if we do that, he'll call these other traffickers, bring them together, and we can rescue them all in one day. Now, he knew more about my background than most people. I have a certain set of skills that makes me somewhat safe in a dangerous place. But most importantly, he needed somebody who can negotiate this real estate transaction. And so 2 days later, I'm face to face with the most evil people you can imagine that are literally selling 8-year-old children. And I'm sitting across this table at him at this restaurant. Halfway through the meeting, one of them leans forward and he said, Pablo, he said, I have a gift for you. I said, really, what's your gift? He shows me his phone and there's a picture of an 11-year-old girl on his phone. He said, this is Princess. She's still a virgin. We just took delivery of some. She's my gift for you for this party. He starts talking about horrific things I could do to this little child. And I thought, if we could get these children out before they were ever hurt the first time,
Yeah.
that would be a miracle. And something he said made me realize he had more than hurt. I said, Fuego, I said, you just took delivery. You have more virgins? He goes, oh yeah, we got 3 or 4 more. I said, you have to bring those to my party. I'm very interested in them as well. He goes, no. He says, they're too expensive. I said, they're too expensive. I'm already paying this guy $25,000 for this party. I'm
Right.
paying him $500 per child for a minimum of 2 hours in the afternoon, minimum of 50 kids, right?
Right.
And he says, Jefe, you already paid 25,000. You want to F these other virgins. It's going to cost you maybe 2,000, maybe 5,000 for that little one. It's going to cost you maybe 10,000 more. Now, at this point, there was no acting involved. I was literally pissed. He's
I
talking
was
about
gonna
these
say,
children
how'd
like they're
you keep
commodities.
that the composure in that
Well, what's
moment?
interesting is when he showed me that picture, I had a Navy SEAL that was right behind me. He was my real bodyguard and my show bodyguard. We told
Yep.
them, this rich guy's going to come here, so he has his own bodyguards, whatever. He's standing behind me, and he clears his throat and he says, I need to take a look around the restaurant, make sure everything's going to be safe. He walks away. Later, when we were debriefing, that Navy SEAL said, he said, I looked at that picture of that little girl. She looked like my child at home, about the
Geez.
same age. He said, I almost unholstered my weapon and shot him right there. He said, if I did, you'd lose the rest of the little kids, right?
Right.
It'd be done. And so, I'm sitting there, and he says, it's going to cost you an extra $10,000. I've got a suit on that costs more than my first car. I've got a $50,000 watch on. It's all
Yeah.
show that I'm right. I
Yeah.
put my hands on my chest and I said, you don't think I can afford an extra $10,000? He's like, oh, no, Jefe, no. Jefe is boss, right? I
Yeah.
said, I want every one of those virgins at my party. I said, they damn well better be virgins when they get there. They're not for you. They're for me and my guys. You understand? He goes, oh, yeah, Jefe, I understand. This stupid smile on his face.
Jeez.
And 2 weeks later, we had met with our team had met with the Colombian federal agents and the U.S. Embassy. The federal agents had provided 40 agents for us. 4 of them were like our waiters and our cooks and our maids. They're not very good cooks, but they're armed, right? 25 of them are there. We're there to storm the party at the right time. And these guys showed up on the island with 54 children. Almost every one of them was under the age of 16, 17 years old. Some of them were taken from other countries. And we put them in a separate part of the house because they were already traumatized enough. We don't want them seeing the guns and the money changing hands on their behalf and everything else.
Right.
We're sitting outside at this table negotiating this business deal from hell. And one of the traffickers stands up, the one that showed me the picture.
Yeah.
He said, Pablo, I have to show you the gifts that I brought you. He went in the house where the children are, and immediately we could hear some of the kids crying. They were so scared of what was going to happen next. And it was all I could do to not send somebody in to check on the kids, right? He
Right.
comes back out and he has 4 virgins scared to death. These 3 little girls, 1 little boy. This little boy was 11. I believe they took him from Haiti. They gave him cocaine that morning because he was so scared it was going to hurt. I mean, what kind of effed up monster thinks that that's attractive? Every cell in my body wanted to just hug these kids and say, you're going to be fine. You're going to see your parents again. I couldn't say that. I'm sitting on a chair, Rob. I'm literally as tall as you and I are, just sitting down on a chair right now.
Right.
And they bring this little girl, this 11-year-old, the same one he showed me in the picture on his phone, brings her out in front of me. Her standing up and me sitting down were almost eye level. And I could see into her soul. And that was the most disturbing moment of my entire life, because all I could see was fear. She had her makeup face had little tear streaks on it. She was so scared of coming and meeting me, the man who was supposed to defile her. And I was so glad it was us there.
Yeah.
And not some monster.
Not somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. I took her little hands. I took her hands and I said, ¿Cómo te llamas? What's your name? She didn't answer her name. I'm sure that's because her real name wasn't Princess. In the movie, this little girl was depicted. The movie Sound of Freedom, and we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yep.
This, my character on that first rescue was that rich guy that Jim Caviezel's trying to, convince to come and fund it. And,
Yep.
and I said no until they actually gave a picture of this little girl to my driver, and that's what changed my opinion and made me decide to go and fund the mission. In real life, I was already there. I was already at that restaurant when he showed me that picture, but sitting there and seeing her in real life, and she stood there in front of me, scared to death. I made a commitment at that moment to myself, to God, and to that child, that I would dedicate my life to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth. That would never happen. I could not believe that happened anywhere, that somebody would sell the innocence of a child. And the most beautiful moment of my life was after the agents came, stormed the party, arrested everybody. Child Protective Services people came in with the children.
Yeah.
And they started laughing. They started singing with the children. And that sound of freedom was the most beautiful sound that I ever heard.
Wow.
So that was an incredibly defining moment in changing my trajectory in everything that I was putting money into. I had a Lamborghini Aventador, a white convertible one with the doors coming up, that I had on my vision board that I was planning on buying that spring.
Yeah.
And I turned the agent who was with me. I said, I'm not going to buy that car.
Yeah.
I want to give you guys the money. What do you need? And he said, Paul, he said, I want to go public. This was 10 years ago. He said, I want to be on CNN, ABC. I want to be the face of this. He said, we need somebody to help lead these missions. And he said, and a lot of the demand for things like this comes from guys with, he said, sorry to say, Paul, that comes from guys with big, arrogant egos and big paychecks. He says, big pocketbooks. He said, you fit the bill. It's guys like Jeffrey Epstein. He said, I can't teach my Navy SEALs how to wear a $50,000 watch and a custom suit and negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal. He said the traffickers see through fake money all day long. He said, I've never found an ultra successful businessman who's had the training that you've had. He said, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. That was the beginning. And I have since led or played a key part in over 70 undercover rescue missions in 15 countries over the next 10 years.
That's unbelievable. I mean, wow. that just hits a chord, being able to do that, being able to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself and start something that, over 5,000 children have been liberated. You put out this Sound of Freedom movie that
it's changed the world. We've had 70 million people watch that movie and hundreds of millions more who have heard about it or have their lives have changed because of the conversations with people who have seen it. Literally every country in the world now,
Yeah.
we're able to go in and say, listen, we're here to help you. We're here to help you change the laws and the policies to keep the children safe. Because I have been there, I've been in the deepest recesses of hell. I've seen the worst part of humanity, and I know what's working and what's not working in these countries. And now we have the credibility to come in and do something about it. And literally millions of children are safer today because of that.
Wow. I always say the greatest impact you'll make in this world you may never know about. And that really sounds like with you. I mean, there's so many people that are benefiting from this and so many people that are changing their lives. Talk to me more about your mindset. How do you keep um how do you keep that, in essence, optimistic movement forward when you see the recesses of hell? You see this just disgusting display of, it's not even humanity.
It's not.
How
It's
do you
not.
how do you keep yourself in that
For a long
mindset?
time in the beginning, I told my operators in the beginning, I said, listen, I said, it's not our job to judge. It's God's job. But if we need to send these guys to that meeting a little bit early, I'm good with it. That's
That's
kind of
okay, right? That's
that was
okay.
okay, and we did. We had 4 different traffickers that died while we were in missions. Now they actually got killed by each other. There was turf wars and stuff over it. It's a super dangerous area. I had one of our operators got stabbed 27 times.
Oh,
Another one actually got killed in Haiti, and I was at his funeral when I met my dear wife. I tell people, meeting a beautiful Colombian actress is kind of cool, but when she's donating her time at an orphanage in Haiti,
oh my
that's my kind of
gosh.
girl. And
Jeez.
what was interesting is right after we met, this is such a beautiful story about her, and then I'll go into the mindset. I got nominated to and accepted to receive the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. They
That's
shut down the
amazing.
island. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful, and I had to wear a tuxedo, and she needed to wear a gala dress, and so I wanted to know. I had this at the time. I had this stupid closet where I had I had 8 different tuxedos and all this bullshit, right? And so I wanted to figure out which tux I should wear. So I asked her, I said, what gala dress? What color is your gala dress so I can match my tux? And she didn't have one. I'm like, okay, that's okay. Let's go get
It's
you one. So
different.
we went exactly. I went to the store and we found her a beautiful dress. It was about $2,000 dress. And we were walking towards the checkout and she looks at the tag and she turns to me and she said, Paul, what's the average cost of rescuing a trafficked child?
Oh,
I said, it's about $2,000.
oh,
She said, I'm not wearing a child. She said, you can buy me a $200 dress and we can donate the rest to the foundation.
jeez.
And that's when I knew she was the right pick for me, and
Wow.
and so one of the reasons why I even qualified for a relationship with her is the same way that we managed. And this is something that's going to be an eye opener for some of the audience, but I'm just going to talk frankly about what works and what doesn't work. So
Yeah.
let's back up. The company that I sold, I touched on it earlier, before I got into the real estate industry, was one that helped people with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addictions. We had a
Yeah.
cognitive restructuring program that helped people overcome and change their negative habit patterns of thought. But it would take 12 weeks with a personal coach, working with them 1 to 2 hours a day to help people break
Wow.
free of some of these debilitating things. And so fast forward, now I was in an entirely different world, and I had Navy SEALs and Green Berets who had seen the worst part of battle, who after only one undercover mission, seeing children being sold, seeing a madam open up a menu and literally go in through this menu with these pictures of these children and the things that they would do and what cost, this Green Beret just turned white. They couldn't handle it. And so I was washing out of these operators. And after 1 or 2 missions, we had to find more. And there was 2 operators that were able to work with me on a lot of, I did 70 missions. I had
Right.
Jimmy had done 14, Andy had done 22 undercover missions with me. And
Wow.
Jimmy and Andy both called me on the phone. We had been doing operations for a couple years, and I was still, it was heavy. It was heavy. It was dark, and They said, Paul, do you trust us? I said, well, I trust you literally with my life when we're doing these missions. They said,
Right.
you need to come with us to this total transformational event. It'll be the most transformational thing you've ever experienced. Now, that says something. You know,
Yeah.
I know Tony Robbins. I've literally walked across coals together, like standing next to him, right? And when he's there, I mean, there I've done
Transformation. Yeah.
I knew transformation. And then they said, you know, this is a doctor who has studied for many years on different tools to help people with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addiction. I said, well, I know a lot about that. That's the company
Yeah.
I sold, you know, and they said it's a healing retreat. You need to be there. And now at the time, I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I was Paul effing Hutchinson, right? I still had the
Do you have
basketball
that
court in my
shirt?
basement.
Do
I
you have that
still
shirt?
had I should need to get one.
You need a
Yeah.
shirt.
Well, I know my wife and my daughter bought me one that's one of my favorite quotes. It's called "Did you fix your shit yet?" Right? And it came from what happened in this experience. And they said, well, this doctor has studied all around the world in different types of holistic healing and has found something that is incredibly effective at helping people release this negative energy and PTSD and all this other crap. And we
Yeah.
were also, you know, trying to explore ways to take away the demand. We realized that just doing undercover missions wasn't going to fix the problem. We needed to heal humanity. I mean, how the hell have we gotten to the point where the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world
Yeah.
has anything to do with selling children for sex? You know, it was beyond me. And every time we pulled these children out of hell, if not enough was being done to fix the demand, another 20 were being sucked back into this horrific position to be sold again. And so
Right.
somehow we needed to fix that. And I also came to an understanding that every single one of these traffickers and every one of the perpetrators had been raped as children themselves, had hold on to all this negative energy. Now, it
Huh.
doesn't make what they're doing okay. I tell people
Right.
this, don't get me wrong. I am not a pedophile sympathizer. I have put my life in danger hundreds of times to ensure they never hurt innocents again. But what I found is that I found myself wishing, what if we have a time machine? What if we could go back before these children were ever abused in the first place?
Right.
And save them before it ever happened? What would that look like? Well, it would look like us sitting down with these traffickers and saying, what is going on in your life that makes you think that going down that road is okay in any way? And I came to an understanding also of all the missions that I did that the common thread with these people was not earrings in their noses and tattoos on their necks, that the common thread was arrogance and greed and lust and
Huh.
unresolved childhood trauma. And
Wow.
now, statistically, the majority of people who were abused as children, whatnot, don't end up hurting children. They come up, they're protectors, you know, they're like you and I. We want to
Yep.
stand up and do something good. But still, those childhood trauma issues come out in low self-esteem or anxiety or depression or addictions or PTSD or anger issues, or in some cases, the transfer of that trauma in hurting a child. And so these are all things that were in my mind as I got this phone call from these two operators saying,
Yeah.
Paul, do you trust us? They said, this doctor has identified some tools that are incredibly effective. And they sent me some reports by Johns Hopkins University. Now, some of the audience is going to be surprised at this, but I'll just tell it what it is because this is incredibly effective. Back in the late 60s, President Nixon decided he was going to classify a whole bunch of things as Schedule 1 drugs. So
Okay.
what I'm talking about is things like sassafras and white lily and psilocybin, different types of psychedelics. And so we've been taught our whole lives that things like magic mushrooms are as dangerous as cocaine because we could go to jail for a long time if we had them.
Right.
Those studies by Johns Hopkins University have reported that things like psilocybin are safer than table sugar. There
Huh.
has never been a case of addiction. There has never been a case of overdose. And now I'm not a fan of people doing recreational use, but when used with a trained facilitator
Yeah.
in the right environment, they are the most powerful tool that John Hopkins has found, that I have found in helping people release childhood trauma, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and addictions. And so,
Wow.
so that became that one day. And this is just with a single session. Single. This isn't something where you know, microdose forever, whatever else. With a single guided meditation,
Yeah.
plant medicine healing experience has been one of the most powerful things I have ever experienced in releasing all this negative energy and allowing us to focus on true healing and making a global impact. And
Wow.
so that's just kind of a high level one. You know, people can get more information by just studying online. Look up Jordan Peterson has done a bunch of stuff. Joe Rogan has talked about it a lot. You can go on to liberatinghumanity.com and get some more information on our retreats as well.
That's amazing. I mean, and that's what it takes, thinking outside of the box, just like you did with, with doing, the Sound of Freedom and all of those things that you did. It's thinking outside the box. How does that, I want to kind of dive into that for a second here, because a lot of people are scared to do that because of the ramifications, because it it could backfire on them. What is your thought process, and how have you done that throughout your life to be able to think outside the box because you see that somebody needs to do it to make a difference?
Absolutely. Well, the mindset started with understanding where happiness comes from. You know, so many
Yeah.
times we literally get stuck in this rut, you know, or the box. Let's talk about the box we live in, the box we drive in, the box we work in, and the box we
Yeah.
drive back to our box that we live in again, right? We literally are in this box after box, and
Yeah.
and we live this life of quiet desperation because we're not stepping out of our comfort zone. We're not creating, we're not growing in any way. Yet you look back in your life, the times that you're happiest are ones that you're progressing in some way. You're either getting in
Yes.
better shape, you're progressing in your relationship, you're progressing financially, you're educating yourself, you're progressing spiritually, getting closer to God. There's all kinds of different things that we innately, as our eternal beings, are created for progression, for growth and expansion. And that growth and expansion does not happen when we're living in those boxes.
Right.
We have to get outside of ourselves. We have to get outside of that. And unfortunately, it's stepping out of a comfort zone that does so. We're like, oh, you know, I don't know about that. What if, what if, what if? Well, when you're thinking what if, when you have negative expectations about the future, you have to understand that faith is not a religious principle. Faith is a principle of power. It's the most powerful law in the
Right.
universe, and it's simply this: it's the unwavering conviction that what I want to have happen will happen. Well, that fear and faith are pretty much, they can't exist in the same person at the same time on the same subject because they're the same power. People who believe that bad things will happen to them actually attract that into their lives. And people who believe that good things will happen will attract that into their lives. So if you're living a life of fear and what if thinking and negative expectations, then inevitably you're going to use that power to attract those things into your life. So changing that perspective and seeing life for what you want to rather than focusing on things that you don't want to create is incredibly powerful. In fact, I use this principle a lot when we were doing undercover work. I truly believe that finding these children was not something that was done through logic and protocol. We were being
Yes.
led. And there are countless examples where I would tell the operators, listen, this isn't a religious discussion, but I believe in God. And whether you believe there's a higher power very interested in us finding these children. I don't care if you think that God is a man or a woman or a tree or a
Right.
cloud or a universe, it doesn't matter. God's not okay with an 8-year-old being raped. And
Right.
so it was easy for me to have unwavering conviction that we were going to find these kids.
Yeah.
And you just had to learn how to listen, how to tune in to that still small voice of truth. In fact, I'm writing a book called Are You Listening? I have one coming out within the next few weeks that's called The Sound of Freedom, that goes into depth onto the operations and things that parents can do to keep their kids safe.
Amazing.
But I have one called Are You Listening that talks about tuning into that and changing that mindset and stepping out of that comfort zone and being led to a way that you can create a positive impact in the world around you and your family.
I love what you're talking about of that faith over fear because it's so powerful. I mean, I can only imagine the fear that into going into those undercover operations. But like you're saying, that faith in the bigger meaning, the bigger purpose, how important is it for an individual to find that purpose to that they can have that faith in to continue to be successful or to find success for the first time?
I believe that all of us, every single person, is here for a great purpose. And it's just a matter of getting out of your own way, releasing those negative habit patterns of thought that are keeping us stuck in anxiety and depression and fear and everything else. All of us have a purpose. And because we are all connected in a
Yeah,
beautiful way to that divine light. And and sometimes that purpose we allow life to get in the way, and money and things and image and everything else. Yet if we take the time to meditate, and I say that in a some people, their communication with God is very one-sided.
yeah,
Fix this, sorry about this, and blessed this will happen, and we're done, right? And then
yes,
and we never take the time to be led. We really don't. We don't take the time to listen at all. And so it is vitally important, and I teach this in some of our healing retreats. I go through a deep educational process on breath work and meditation and turning off all of that crap in your mind to be able to listen from a place of the heart. And
right,
once you do so, once you can get to that state, then you can start identifying what your real life mission is and what's truly important. And then the road gets easy. It's not difficult, guys. People are thinking, oh, how do you build a multi-billion? How do I do that? Well, get out of your own way, start to listen, co-create with divinity, and that process becomes much, much easier.
wow. Paul, this has been such an amazing emotional conversation with you, and I appreciate it. I love your quote. I want to say this because it's such a powerful quote. He who has a powerful, positive impact in the most lives wins. Tell me where that came from because it's such a awesome quote.
Well, when I was a teenager, I had a posters on my wall. I had a bunch of Lamborghinis and Ferraris and big house, and I had a quote that said, "He who has the most toys wins." Right? And after that first mission and helping those kids, I changed that quote to he or she, the person who has
Yeah,
a powerful, positive impact in the most lives wins. We talked
love that.
briefly before about where happiness comes from. It comes from only two places. You look back in your life, true long-term happiness comes from either personal growth or personal progression or helping somebody else progress. It creates incredible. You think about when your child took their first step or said their first words, or when you're actively involved in creating value for the world and the people around you, as well as you personally growing and progressing. That's where peace and content and happiness truly come from. So if we want to live in a world of peace and a world of happiness, let us all embrace that principle and
Right.
and step into the unknown of stepping out of your comfort zone so you can grow and progress, and then of course helping others do the same, so having a powerful positive impact in the lives of other people.
Amazing. Make sure you go to paulhutchinsonofficial.com. You can find out more about his keynote speaking, about events, about just being able to contact him to find out more. I got three questions for you to end this one. Are you ready, Paul?
I am.
If you could go back to your 18-year-old self and give yourself one piece of advice, what's that going to be?
Wow, there'd be so much there. um I think about all the stupid things I did on
Oh
the way
gosh, we all
through,
did that.
and I haven't lived a perfect life. I'm literally on my third marriage, and there's a lot of advice I could give my younger self about not being stupid in that way, and I would tell my younger self this story that I learned later on in life.
Yeah.
Um, I was at a conference with it was on time management and stuff, and this trainer came in the room, and he had this big bottle, this big jar. And he then pulled out of this bucket a bunch of river rocks, fist size rocks, and he filled it all
Yeah.
the way full with these. And he said, "Is it full?" And most people say, "Yeah, it looks pretty full." And then he took out some gravel and he poured it in. He said, "Now is it full?" And everybody, "Yeah, now it looks pretty full," because it kind of filtered in through between. And then he took out some sand and he poured that in there, and it filtered in between the little rocks and stuff. And then he said, "Now is it full?" It looked pretty full, and some people were catching on. And then he took a bottle of water and he poured it in until now it was completely full with the sand and the gravel and the water and the bigger rocks. And he said, "What did we learn from this?" And most of us said, "Well, you can always do more. You can always put a little bit more in." He goes, "Nope, that's not the lesson here. The lesson is, if I didn't start with the big rocks, I would have never fit them in. If I started with the
Huh.
sand and the water and everything else, those big rocks have never fit." He said, "You need to identify what things in your life are really the big rocks. What's truly important. Once you've identified what's truly important and you prioritize those, then you can fill in the rest with everything else." And so that's what I would tell my 18-year-old self, is identify those big rocks and make sure that you prioritize those ones first.
Wow. Okay. I love that story. That's amazing. All right, that leads me into the second one of, if you could give people, everybody goes through challenges and struggles in their lives. If you could give them two habits to incorporate into their daily life to continue to push forward, to continue to take that step, what would those two habits be?
One of them is going to surprise people a little bit, but people leave the movie Sound of Freedom and they're like, "I want to do something. I want to
Right.
go rescue kids." And I tell them the worst thing you can do is go to Colombia and go try to rescue kids. You're going to get shot,
Yeah.
right? And you're probably going to get arrested. The
It's
best
not
thing
going to
you can
work.
do is go home and hug your children. Figure out ways to keep your family together. Why? Because the majority of children who are being trafficked come from broken homes, from runaways, from a broken foster care program. And so figuring out ways to keep your family together is vitally important. So here's a statistic, a few of them.
Yeah.
The average person in America has a 1 in 2 chance or higher of getting a divorce. Over 50% of marriages end up in divorce, and even higher than that on second and third marriages. And so what if I could give you one piece of advice that would take that number from 1 in 2 to 1 in 1,152? I mean, that's a massive
That's a
difference. Just
massive difference. Yeah.
one habit you could do every day to keep your family together that takes it from 1 in 2 to 1 in 1,152. That one habit is this: pray with your spouse every day. I don't care what religion you are, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Together, come together and turn to a higher power together every day takes that number from a 50% divorce rate to 1 in over 1,000. So that's the advice that I would give, and
Wow.
that makes all the difference. And the second piece of advice is what I call little wins. Every time we talk negatively about ourselves and it lowers our self-esteem, it takes away our ability to create more value in the world. And so looking yourself in the mirror and saying, "I love you, and you're a good person," and visualizing who you want to be, and start with the little wins. It's like,
Yep.
I'll even do stupid things like when I tie my shoes in the morning, I say, "Good job, Paul," right? Or I
Yeah.
put my socks on the right way. I treat myself with like a little 5-year-old. "Good job, Paul," right? And that way, when Tony Robbins said, "Paul, I want to have you come on stage for 5 minutes," and pulls me out of the audience and gives me the microphone in front of 15,000 people, I'm able to rock it. Do you know why? Because I tied my shoes that morning, right? I talked
That's great. I love
positively to
that.
myself over time, and
Yeah.
that in itself builds your confidence to be able to handle the big stuff.
Man, I love that. I love that. This last one's fun. I don't have, I literally, usually I can figure out some of the people that they'll have, but I don't have any clue of who you're going to pick. So if you could have coffee at a firehouse table, so in other words, any question can be asked and it's going to be answered with three people, deceased or alive, who would those three be?
Hmm. I would have Nikola Tesla
Okay.
and Dr. Royal Rife. He was the
Okay.
one who identified frequency vibration technology that healed cancer in the early 1900s. Those guys would be brilliant to ask them questions. Actually, I think I would probably have Royal Rife instead of Tesla, because the two other ones,
Yeah.
I would actually have Buddha and Jesus.
There you
Better
go.
known originally as Yeshua. You know, that's
Yeah.
those who I would have, and because I'd have the Eastern stuff from Buddha and from years and years ago, and then of course I couldn't be there without my brother there, and then
Yep.
I'd have Royal Rife so I could learn all about his frequency stuff. That would be fun.
My gosh, what a good table. Well, Paul, you are an amazing human. I appreciate everything that you do and everything that you continue to do to make positive impact, and appreciate you for coming on the show today.
I'm super grateful to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, folks, we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening and supporting the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast. And please share this episode with a friend or family member. To find out more about Fireman Rob, or if you have a question, go to www.firemanrob.com. Until next time, live your life forged in the fires.